Thank you, Bob, and good morning to everyone. I'm honored to represent the university and welcoming all of our speakers, community members, alumni, and our students today, and for the entirety of the Conference on World Affairs. This unique week-long event embodies my three imperatives for our campus of shaping tomorrow's leaders, being a leader in innovation and entrepreneurship, and positively impacting humanity. And I'm sure you will see that throughout the conference. Please be sure to join us immediately following our keynote address for the public premiere of a short documentary film, The Light Shines On. It's been shown in limited release previously, and the response has been tremendous. It's a wonderful film showcasing the University of Colorado Boulder, including this conference, and where it is in its place in the history of the university. And I'm certain you will leave today inspired for the remainder of the conference. Now it's my privilege to introduce our opening keynote speaker, Leyla Introduction. Ms. Acaroglu is a sustainability provocateur who is internationally recognized for pushing the boundaries on environmental perspectives. She activates social and environmental change through creative interventions. An award-winning designer, social scientist, and sustainability expert, Leyla has shattered barriers through her work in disruptive design across sustainability and educational initiatives. Her disruptive design method is a process for activating social change by design. Leyla's TED Talk about sustainability has reached over 1 million viewers, making it one of the most watched talks ever on sustainability. Her talk today is entitled, Disrupting the Status Quo by Design. She'll be taking questions following her remarks, so please submit questions via the CWA mobile app. Now please welcome Leyla Introduction.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited. First time in Boulder. Thank you. Oh, an interactive bunch, I see. All right, well, you might regret that later. All right, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction and for having me here. I'm extremely excited. So essentially, I am a designer and a sociologist, and I'm very passionate about the planet. I really like it. Turns out it's the only one we've got. So I'm quite interested for my own self-interest and for all of the people I love and care about in dedicating my professional career and my personal life choices to making sure that we can keep the planet for as long as possible. So this is really what I'm going to share with you today, some thoughts and insights and projects around how to do that. So one thing that wasn't mentioned at the introduction was what I'm passionate about most, and that is how to design a future that works better for all of us. It's a personal challenge I set myself, and I'm very interested in how I can help share with you today how you can also be a part of this future design and also be making sure that the lifestyle choices that you make are helping to create a kind of world you want to live in and you want your kids to live in. So I am a serial entrepreneur. It's a problem. I've cut myself off. I have 3 organizations in 3 countries. And what I'm passionate about is sharing creativity. So I have this thing called the Unschool of Disruptive Design, which is really an experimental knowledge lab. I design all of these tools that are gamified experiences that kind of combine cognitive science and social understanding to help make people think differently. But I also really am passionate about non-traditional education. So I run these experimental activations that happen globally. So the Unschool pops up in random locations all over the world. We've been in Mumbai, in San Francisco, in Cape Town. We're going to be in Kuching at the end of this year. We take 20 people on this really immersive experience around how to activate their agency for positive change. And we teach systems, sustainability, and design as the pillars for a profession in helping to positively disrupt the status quo in the world around us. And aside from the Unschool, well, as a result of the Unschool, I was named Champion of the Earth by the United Nations, which is an actual title that I was surprised to find out about, probably just as much as you guys. I got the phone call and was like, oh, what? I was Googling it as I was like, okay, I think I could like this. And then, of course, once I received the award, I was like, do I get a cape? Because I swear to God that I should have gotten a cape instead of this award. Because clearly with a title for the rest of your life as Champion of the Earth, you should be able to like cape it up occasionally. But actually, as a result of this challenge, I actually rang one of my coworkers and I was like, so I just got named Champion of the Earth. Do you think I get a cape? And she was like, no, but you already have superpowers. And I was like, really? She goes, yeah, you got like the superpower of being wrong. You have the superpower of systems thinking. And so we made this toolkit, which anyone can download online at the Unschools. It's these 12 everyday superpowers that anyone has or can foster to help bring about positive change in the world. And because that's really what we need. We need this rapid transition to a sustainable and regenerative future. And the most exciting thing is that it's possible and it's happening. And of course, there are many challenges that we need to overcome. But you know what that I've learned in the last few years is that challenges fuel innovation. It's challenges with the right amount of creativity that create the environment for new ideas and for people to work together, to collaborate, and to connect to overcome a lot of the issues that we face. If that wasn't the case, we wouldn't be here today. We have solved so many problems. And this is something that I found really, really fascinating for myself. I mean, I have sociology and I have industrial understanding, but I personally identified this knowledge gap, which totally changed the trajectory of my life over the last few years. So when I was named Champion of the Earth, I don't usually admit this, but I'll do it anyway. I went to do a beach cleanup with one of my fellow champions, Afro Shea, who's done the world's biggest beach cleanup in Mumbai. If you don't know about it, look it up. It's incredible. And we went to clean this beach in Mexico where we were, and I saw a coconut on the side of the beach, and I made a comment, which was like, oh, a coconut, how did that get here? And this guy looked at me like, he was like, you're standing on a beach. How do you think the coconut got here? And I was like, oh, right, I get it. So the coconut came on the same current that all the plastic came on. I got it now. And it just had this really strong, like, I feel stupid, I just got named Champion of the Earth and I don't know how a coconut got to a beach. There were no coconut trees around, by the way, okay? There wasn't like a coconut tree where it could have just dropped from. It was just a random coconut by itself. And this really inspired me to think about how I could disrupt my own learning experience. And I started this lifelong challenge now to figure out how nature works. So I bought a farm in Portugal. It's a very strange trajectory of life choices that had been abandoned for 20 years. And I wanted to figure out how to regenerate this beautiful space. So now I have this living learning laboratory where I've been restoring it using sustainable design techniques and also incorporating a whole suite of different types of traditional organic and contemporary sustainable agricultural practices. These are just some of the before and afters of the design. But the most exciting thing is growing things yourself. Who here has grown something themselves and eaten it? Doesn't it change your life? It's like the best therapy. If you're feeling sad, go and grow something. It's an incredible experience. It changes your mind. And there's a few things that I've learned already, and this is the very early stages of this project. One of the first things I've learned from nature is that there's no such thing as waste. It doesn't exist. Everything is a resource for something else. Nature is the ultimate, not recycler, but cycler. Everything just cycles beautifully through these systems. I also learned that you get out what you put in. I had this one vegetable patch last summer. It was under the trees and it was quite far away, and because I was hand watering, I got really lazy and I never quite gave it enough love, and nothing grew there. Everything just stayed little and small. It taught me that basically if we don't support young minds, if we don't give people the right resources, they too can't flourish. And I also learned that everything in nature is designed to optimize life. You know when you open a garlic and it's got the little green bit inside? You know that it's its baby. If you plant that, you'll get more garlic. And I know that sounds really silly, like the coconut, but when you figure that out and you do it, you're like, this is how it works. And for me, this is fascinating because we've created all of these systems out in the world that don't work like that, where life is actually restricted. And so a lot of this stuff is really about how we all think about how the future is going to work for us and the people we love and care about. I'm a big fan of Buckminster Fuller, who always says the best way to predict the future is to design it. And that's really something that I try to teach and I embody myself. But design is a misunderstood word, so let me just break it down a little bit here. Design is everywhere. It is literally the most impactful thing of your life. Not just the material goods that you interact with and buy, but the entire experience of being a human. Over the millennia of our evolution, we have been constructing the world to meet our needs. We've been forming materials and nature to make our lives enjoyable, comfortable, successful. So we design the world, and the world designs us. It's this powerful social scripter. The way we design our cities, whether or not they're walkable or they're more inclined to be drivable, I don't think that's a word, impacts the health of the citizens. Heart disease goes up if you have less people walking and more people driving. So our entire life is influenced by the designed world. And we've created systems right now in the last 10 to 15 years that are extremely sophisticated at getting us to do things. Like your device that's probably in your pocket right now, that you have an emotional connection to, admit it. If you lose it, what happens to you? It's like, oh my God, how am I going to live? Did you know that iPhones have only been around for 10 years? Think about it. So, for example, we have designed these incredibly beautiful addictive systems. So if anyone here is studying design or UX or has worked in this space, you'll know about it. Basically, most of the digital experiences that we engage with are manipulating our desires, but they're also doing this thing called dark patterning, which is where it's very easy to use cognitive biases to challenge, to trick you into doing things. Like when you're buying a flight, for example, you don't get to opt into insurance. It automatically opts you into insurance. So there's all of these tactics. But most fascinating is that some of the people who help design the experiences, the user experiences that we all have come to adopt, like the little notification symbols, they don't let their kids use the technology. They're literally, most of the tech executives are concerned about the impact on the growing young minds. In fact, this is a quote from the previous editor of Wired, which is all about technology. And we've created this system, and then we all participate in this system. The thing is, though, it's not just our technology, it's our entire designed world. You know, if you have a building where there are stairs versus an elevator, you're going to have more people getting that little bit of exercise and helping to reduce the emissions of the elevator because there's stairs. The entire designed world scripts and influences our experiences. And one of the reasons this is so powerful is because we live in very beautifully constructed systems. Not just the natural ones that we are all reliant on, but also the social systems that govern and instruct how we experience the world. Let me just break it down right. Okay, so humans created this thing called a linear system. We all are the recipients of the industrial age. And this linear system is where we take resources out of the ground, or we cut down trees, or we shear sheep. We get resources from nature, we process them into usable goods, whether that be a cell phone or a woolen jumper. Jumper, Australian. Sweater, sorry. You're like, what is she talking about? You get points if you can catch all my Australianisms. So we process them into usable goods, and then we end up throwing them often in landfill or burning them, or they escape into the natural environment. And this linear system is designed to maximize waste. And it's a really unfortunate system because it has all of these unintended consequences. Like this is the last 60 years of landfill sites here in the US. It's a phenomenal increase if you think about it. There was not that much need for big holes in the ground where we put our trash when we didn't have a hyper-disposable society. And what this does is it means that we've maximized externalities. And for those of you who aren't studying economics or have done so, externalities are things that are not accounted for by the system. And the most tragic part of our system, the one that we've designed, the economic system that we are all part of, is that we do not account for any services provided by nature, nor do we account for any of the social services that make healthy societies, like child rearing or looking after friends and family who are ill. In fact, the only things that are accounted for in our GDP-based system, growth domestic product system, is we only account for goods and services that are produced in a country and that are sold. So we do not account for any services that nature provides for free unless we have economicized it, which is also not a word. Should be, though. So this system has designed exploitation into the basis of our success as a species, which I think is fundamentally flawed, because if we continue on this trajectory, we will run out of things to exploit. Although mindfill landing is still a thing these days. And here's the opposite side of this linear system. Nature creates regenerative systems. As I said, nature is optimized to give life life. And so if we can look to changing the system that we've created, which to be fair has fueled an incredible revolution of our species, but we have the opportunity to dramatically change this. And I like to remind people is that we all need nature to survive. There is not one single person who can live for longer than 3 days without food, air, and water. We all must breathe. If you don't believe me, hold your breath for 60 seconds, see what happens. It's okay, you can't kill yourself. You have a brain that makes it physiologically impossible to self-suffocate through holding your breath. And air pollution, which is a critical problem right now, is considered to be the new tobacco. Between 6 to 9 billion people die every year, depending on where you look statistically, based on associated health impacts from air pollution. But in saying all of this, the one thing I know to be true is that one of the most empowering things about this is that the only thing that we know to be true in life is that everything is changing all the time. And this gives us huge opportunity. So sustainability as a concept is about meeting the needs of current generations without negatively affecting the ability for future generations to meet their needs. I like to think of it as an insurance policy against your kids hating you in the future. Because we have the knowledge, and we actually have a lot of the technology. We just need the willpower, the investment, the collaboration, and the tenacity to overcome the problems. And this is really what this concept of the circular economy is proposing to the world. That we can move from this linear system to a circular one, and it is a mega trend. It hasn't quite influenced the US as much as it has in Europe and parts of Asia, but if you get on the Googles, you'll see a lot of fascinating information about the circular economy. But I'll break it down very quickly for you. So basically, we talked about the linear economy, and this is the current industrial system that we are all part of. But what we need to do is we need to figure out how to move beyond the incredible important ideas of recycling and reusing and reducing. But we also need to figure out how to circularize the entire supply chain so that materials are valued across the life of the product. And I'm going to go into this in a bit more detail in a minute. If you want free resources on this, look at this website. I created a whole learning system for the Finnish education system where you can download lots of videos and free resources. You can all go and have a circular economy club here at the school. But most importantly, what I find fascinating about the circular economy and the work that's happening right now around design and systems change is that we're learning how to love problems. Because every problem holds its own solution. That might sound a bit weird, but if you really think about it, anytime you've actually solved a problem, you had to deeply understand the problem first, right? So therefore, in learning about something, you have the tools to then figure out how to recondition it. And most of the environmental and social problems that we have today are because somebody else designed them in the past. Every problem that we face was the good idea that somebody else had, and I have some great examples. Who likes radium? Anyone? Does anyone know what radium is? Good. It's toxic, not good for you. Marie and Perry Carey, who won the Nobel Prize for discovering it, they died from radioactive-related deaths, and also their notebooks are so radioactive that they can't actually touch them at the moment. So it was really popular after radium was discovered to put it in things like healthcare products, body products, water jugs like this one. I went on eBay. You can actually still buy these. They're not obviously being produced now. They're like from the early 1900s. This picture here is a hotel you could go to, which you could get bathed in radium. Radium water bath, you see? Yeah, it's great, huh? So for about 30 years, this was quite common. And there were these things called the radium girls, which, if you're not familiar with this, I did some research and discovered that the ore that was used to make these watches was actually mined here in Paradox Valley, Colorado. And what happened is that these young women were hired in 1917 until 1927 to paint the watches, the numbers of the watches, for the military, because amazing, radium glows in the dark. And they were told that in order to get the very fine painting, that they should take the paintbrush and put it in their mouth and go like that. And so that many of them died from extremely tragic bone degeneration from the radium poison. In fact, it was one of these women who took her case to court on her deathbed that had the radium factories closed. I recently also discovered, just FYI, that heroin was marketed to children in the United States. I'm not joking. These are real ads from 1885 to 1914. We have made some nice mistakes, I would say. And what I find fascinating about these historical cases is when we learn something's not a good idea, that we make changes. And society then adopts this new information and we move forward. And we share that with our young. We get it into universities and we make sure that it comes into colloquial conversation. And this is really the important thing, because right now when we look at the complexity of our society and the challenges that we face, we are often looking just at the surface, just at the obvious parts of the problem, rather than going for the substance. We live on one planet, and every single thing on this planet is interconnected. The only thing I say that is not part of the planet is space junk, which there's a lot of. Everything else relies on something else to exist, and we are the beneficiaries of this beautiful, completely complex system called nature. But we often think about it in that linear way. In fact, the linear economy has created linear thinking, which is reductive, and it breaks the world down into silos and individual parts. But systems thinking as a tool overcomes that. It's where you look at the relationships between things and you dive deep under the problem to know what's really going on rather than to make assumptions about how it got to be there. The way I explain this is that there are three main systems at play in the world around us. The first is the layer of the social systems. These are the things that we all know: education, government, family. They're the intangible things that, let's just say, humans were eradicated like the dinosaurs, this would disappear. But what would be left behind are the relics of our industrial system that we designed to support our social system. So the buildings, like this beautiful building, and all of the different infrastructure, like sewage and water systems, that we've evolved to help make our species happy and healthy. These kinds of systems, they're meeting our needs, and in some cases completely exceeding our needs. And all of those resources required to make those industrial systems work, they come from nature, for free, that we don't account for in our economic system. But the most interesting thing when you look at this is that each of these two tiny circles, they rely on the big one, and without it, we have nothing. And systems thinking helps us start to look at the relationships rather than the obvious. We look at the fact that rather than trying to break the world down, we see it as a whole that is made up of parts. And we don't ignore the parts, we understand that they fit together like a jigsaw puzzle in making the bigger picture. And this kind of tool helps us move beyond blame and towards innovation and opportunity. But just as I mentioned this story of radium, there are many unintended consequences that we are designing today. I'll give you a couple examples. Who here likes tea or coffee? The rest of you are lying. You're like, my arm doesn't work. Okay, so here in the US, I think electric tea kettles are only starting to be a thing. But in the UK, you know, tea, it's very popular there. In fact, 97% of houses own an electric kettle. And what happens is that there's a lot of overfilling. Come on, we all do it. You want one cup of tea, but you just kind of fill it up until it's heavy enough. Do you do that? I do it. Or you forget about it because it doesn't have a ding on it anymore. And so you go away and you come back and you're like, oh, it's gone cold. Well, this is a big problem. In fact, overfilling and these kinds of practices, they're having a huge impact on the system in the UK. In fact, it's such a big impact that it's calculated that the energy wasted from all of that extra water boiled is enough to light all of the streetlights in the UK for 6 months. And even more fascinating is after a really popular TV show, when a lot of people are watching, the ads come on, everybody gets up to make a cuppa. They have this thing called a peak energy load, where so much energy is drawn from the system because it takes 2,000 watts in order for an electric kettle to heat water, that there's a guy who has to buy nuclear power from France in order to cope with the extra energy. Right? So we have these individual actions, the design of our everyday products, they impact the system. And the other example I have is K-cups, which are a US phenomena. If you go outside of the US, these things don't exist. And the guy who designed these was trying to solve a problem, which was, in his office, people had terrible coffee. And it was sitting on the, I don't know how, you know, and it gets hot, and it goes, and so everyone was throwing out their coffee. And so he decides to solve it. He's like, can I not make a product that has a single shot of caffeine? It's perfectly delivered, and that reduces all the waste. And he came up with this concept. He ended up in the emergency ward because his heart was palpitating so much because he had so much coffee. This is a true innovator. Test your product. And what happened was he came up with this concept and he sold it for $50,000 to the company that now owns it, and he deeply regrets it. He is on record as wishing he had never created it nor sold it because 60 billion is the number of these little death tombs have ended up in landfill. Apparently 9 billion every year. Completely unrecyclable. And what's really frustrating is it's like really thick plastic as well. Like it's just so much of it that goes into it. Think about the last week of your life and how many moments you interacted with disposable things, ubiquitous disposable things. Straws, coffee cups, toilet paper. Very useful, actually. Chopsticks. You know when you go to a fancy Japanese restaurant and they give you disposable chopsticks, but you have a reusable plate? I never understood this. Like billions of disposable chopsticks are used every single year. Our lives are marked by disposability, and disposability is a huge problem because we live on a planet where nothing goes away. And we have a lot of ignorance of the system impacts of our choices. You know, there's this really fantastic tool called Lifecycle Assessment, and the idea of being able to see the impact of our choices by understanding the life impacts of our products. I like to say that everything exists has a life story to tell you, if only it could talk. Your cell phone, this chair, the clothes you're wearing, they had to come from somewhere. We had to extract resources, process them into usable goods, package and transport them, put them in a retail environment. You come along and buy it, and then what happens? Yeah, thank you very much. Some people hoard things, unless you've watched that Netflix show that has created a huge problem for a lot of people. Okay, so let me ask you a quick question. You understand these life cycle stages. Now think of your jeans. Everybody has a pair of jeans. I don't mean the jeans inside you, I mean the jeans on you. Which of these do you think has the biggest environmental impact? Do you think it's the manufacturing, so the growing and the processing? Do you think it's the use phase, or do you think it's end of life? Okay, this involves hands. I can see you all. Who thinks, you have to pick one, who thinks it's the manufacturing? Processing of cotton, sewing, dyeing, okay. Not many of you, a few of you. Okay, who thinks it's the use phase? Like 5 of you. Who thinks it's end of life? I totally tricked you all. There are plenty of people whose arms don't work. I can see you up the back. So it's the use phase. Why? Because you wash them. Oh, yeah, that was a good, oh. You wash them. It's an active product. I mean, some of you don't wash them. In fact, that's what Levi's says to do. And Levi's did the life cycle assessment on this, and they were like, what? It's the washing? We thought it was the growing. To be fair, the growing, the manufacturing, the end of life has a big impact. The thing about jeans is most people keep their jeans for a long time. Very high second-hand use market as well because of the durability. But the washing, it's consistent and it impacts the whole system. And most people wash on hot water using chemicals that end up in the natural environment, and there is the main point of intervention if you were to solve that problem. So shifting from this linear to a circular economy is really important to understand the life of the things that we interact with, understanding supply chains and impact areas. Let me give you another one, coffee cups. Now I've tricked you all. This is usually the point where nobody interacts with me anymore because they're scared of looking silly, even though I'm the only one who can see you. So here we have this product. It's a paper coffee cup. Who's old enough to remember polystyrene coffee cups? Guess what? They're actually better than the paper ones. Someone just went, oh! But actually, it's not either of them that you should be using, just FYI. But when you do use a life cycle assessment to compare the two products and the functionality of carrying hot liquid, the light-weighted nature of polystyrene, because of the fact that it's plastic blown with air, it means that you have less raw materials required, and a paper cup is lined with plastic. So you have a percentage of plastic already in that product, and the other product, the issue is that whilst if it escapes into the natural environment, it has a huge impact. If it ends up in landfill, it's benign. And the thing about this cup is it's not recyclable because of the plastic lining. And in New York, the average New Yorker uses 500 disposable coffee cups every year. There's only 365 days in a year. Now, some of you might say, but we use biodegradable coffee cups in Boulder. Yay! Well, I hate to burst everybody's bubble, but let me just tell you a little bit about biodegradability. Okay, first of all, the term biodegradable, it defines a material property. It doesn't define an environmental benefit. It applies how the product is used and how it is manufactured. So when you have who knows how you make bioplastics? What material do you need? Not oil. Bioplastics are made from biological materials. Okay, you guys in America produce nearly all of it. Yeah! So corn is usually one of the main feedstocks, as is sugarcane. You can actually make bioplastics out of many cellular materials. But the issue is that if you have a traditional agricultural setup to create your corn, meaning you use tractors and pesticides and all of the different inputs, then the amount of embodied petrochemicals in the production of the bioplastic often meets the same amount of raw material plastics that you would need to create the plastic products. That's the first issue. So you have to produce it using a fully kind of sustainable production method. The second issue is that depending on the way you've produced it, It will depend on how compostable or degradable it is. So as now, you should have all had enough time to read my slide, because it's literally the death by PowerPoint slide that I have. Where essentially, in a compostable environment, you have to have the right environment. The ultimate is that we have home composting, and your biodegradable material can just go in that. But most industrially produced compostable materials have to go into an industrial composter. And there are many places that are getting these, and I love them. I think the future involves biodigesters, also because it just is what naturally happens in nature, is that there's microorganisms that digest the material, create byproducts that are useful. And then we have these other degrees of so-called biodegradability. The issue is that these are not necessarily bad. It's important to understand the difference so you can make informed decisions. So when we look at the circular economy, there are two main cycles that we're trying to optimize for. We're trying to optimize for a biological cycle and a technical nutrient cycle. So I'm just going to nerd out on you for about 70 seconds, so everybody listen. A technical cycle is all of the industrial materials that we make. It's things that cannot be biodigested back into nature organically, whereas an organic biodegradable system is like food or toilet paper or things that are not synthesized to a degree where nature can't digest them. So what we want to do is we want to figure out how to create systems or cycles that reuse those materials in the most optimized way. And so what we have to do is redesign everything, basically. All of the things that we need to meet our lives' needs need to be designed to maximize for the likelihood of those values being cycled throughout the economy. Of course, if we don't retool our economy to start with, we might not be able to get there, but that's a whole other point. But if you're interested in exploring this, I have 4 main points of intervention. The first is business models, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Supply chains, life cycle thinking, how we produce things, materials, where they come from, impacts at all the different stages. This thing called product service system design, where we turn a single-use product into a system that meets people's needs, but is something that we can really buy into and support. And then, of course, lifestyle swaps. So we have this concept of the ecological footprint, which is essentially the measurement of how much resources is required in order for humans to meet their needs. And I like to just remind everybody that we all have an impact on the planet. The average American has a much higher one than, say, the average Indian. But every year in around August, the planet exceeds its Earth resources for the year, right? So we go into this ecological overshoot, it's called, in August. And so from August through to the end of the year, we're basically using up all the resources that would be dedicated to future generations. And one of the most impactful ones of these issues is food. And it turns out that it's the one universal thing that we all have to do, which is eat and breathe. Food waste. Who wants to tell me what is the main contributor of food waste in the world? Grocery stores. Them wasting food? Huh? Methane, yes, is the byproduct. We'll get to that, but what's the food waste issue? So we have grocery stores, what else? Restaurants, yeah, the portions. Shh, you're spoiling it. You've watched my TED Talk. You are in my bad books. No, I'm joking. You're not. I love it. A-class student. Okay, fine. She totally ruined it. Most people don't know that fact. Most people think it is the supermarkets. They also think it's the transportation system. And also we have a lot of aesthetic standards, meaning apples should be a certain size. That's why everything looks so uniform. And if you have grown your own food, you do realize that carrots are very rarely straight. Okay, so 40% of the world's food wasted is by consumers, and they say that actually up to a third to up to a half of all food produced globally is wasted. 20% of our impact on climate change is attributed to agriculture, and yes, it is the refrigerator. And one of the reasons that human food waste issue is associated with the refrigerator is because we've designed it to not do its job properly, the reason you have a refrigerator is because you want to keep food longer. Instead, it's a storage facility from things from the 1990s that live at the back. And maybe you're discovering the next version of penicillin, I don't know. But the most impactful thing is this so-called crisper drawer, which I call the soggy drawer, because anything that stays in there longer than 3 days goes very sad. And the reason is because a vegetable and you are made of the same things. I hate to break it to you. And your cells are filled with liquid, water specifically, and other things. But your cells, and you dehydrate, right? If you're on an airplane too long, or you dehydrate, so does a broccoli, right? And so actually, if you do end up with sad-looking vegetables, you can rehydrate them in water. Trick number one. Second trick is just ditch the crisper drawer and get a sealable container. Put your vegetables in there and thank me later. You'll have broccoli for 3 weeks, crisp. Because it controls the environment. The thing is we haven't redesigned the technical delivery of refrigerators. We've stopped the CFCs and the hydrofluorocarbons, thank gosh. But the actual box shape with the drawer and the shelves, same design since they first put it on the market. And one of the other products, byproducts of this issue, of your lettuce or your milk or your bread ending up in landfill, I know you have biodegradable waste streams here in Boulder, right? Yes, good, you should all be using it. Getting organic waste out of landfill is one of the best things you can do to help reduce climate change and also not waste food. But the thing is that when an organic material ends up in landfill, which is an anaerobic environment, meaning it doesn't have much oxygen, then what happens is the microorganisms create methane. This is where these two spoilers in the front there come up, refrigerators and methane. Clearly, good memories. So methane, or methane, is a 25 times more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And methane's an amazing power source. You can make gas and you can power homes with it. In fact, in Australia, they collect methane from the poop plant, where everyone's sewage goes, and they power 150 homes in the place where I used to live. Could you imagine? Be turning on your... Anyway, I'm not going to go there. I'm running out of time and I still have a lot to get through. Okay, so we're going to go a bit faster. Imagine you're on a speed train in Japan. That's what we're getting on, speed train in Japan. Okay, so we've normalized a culture of waste, okay? Think how quickly we got to the point where your individual cucumber has to come wrapped in plastic. And in certain countries in the world now, literally you cannot buy things without it being wrapped in plastic because of safety standards. This is all very new, and this is a complete design flaw. Waste is the product of the systems that we design. And this is one of the most fundamental flaws that I believe we've gotten to, is that we've rested on our laurels because we think recycling will solve the problem. But if you actually understand basic economics, you'll know supply and demand. And if you happen to be in a recycling industry, you're motivated to make sure there is more raw materials for your industry. So when we increase recycling, we increase the production of disposable waste products. And that cycle is getting worse and worse, and it's having huge impacts all over the world. You may or may not know that about 18 months ago, China pulled the plug on taking the world's waste. We were sending, most of the industrialized countries in the world were sending all of their waste products from recycling to China for processing. And they said, no more, sorry guys, contamination rates are too high, it costs us too much money, and we have our own plastic here in China we can use. It basically broke the recycling industry. And you have stockpiles of plastic products sitting in container ships all over the world in docks, and now people are scrambling to find alternative locations that don't have strict environmental policies to take the waste. In fact, this is a recent report that came out that shows the transition from just 10 years, how the whole world basically transitioned their reliance on recycling to China. And what this is called from a systems thinking perspective is shifting the burden. And we do it all the time, where we deflect responsibility from one part of the system to another. And we just go, out of sight, out of mind, not my responsibility, I'm happy with my frappe latte thingy. I don't know how to say it. So my whole thing is, other than redesigning GDPs, we dramatically need to redesign the systems that enforce disposability, because disposability is the problem, whether it be cups or bags. The things that have one use are the antithesis of sustainability. Doesn't matter if we recycle them, and if we have a closed-loop system, then perhaps it gets better. But under the current system, it just makes things worse. And we continue this perpetual cycle, and we make it socially normalized and even desirable. You know, one of the reasons people get those giant coffee cups that they walk down the street in is because socially, it represents busyness, and we have created a cult of busyness, which has all sorts of other problems. But if you look in the trash can in New York, those giant coffee cups are half drunk. Because it's not the caffeine, perhaps, that people want, but it's the culture. It's the culture of convenience and the culture of status. We've normalized this, we've designed this system, and I truly believe we can design ourselves out. Hyperconsumption is the model that we have all been socialized into. The idea that in order to be successful and happy, you must buy a lot of things. And of course, this has been told that this is the fuel of the economy. That if we don't consume things, the economy will slow down and then we'll have less jobs and it'll all be bad for all of us. There's so much new economic theories and models and science that demonstrates that that is not the case. In fact, we can move into a future where we do not have to exploit everything beautiful about the planet in order to succeed as a species, because ultimately, it will be our demise. Because this concept of continual hyperconsumption is the driving force of environmental impact, and often social, because we've designed a system of exploitation that half of our clothes are made in an exploitative environment for the people who are creating them. And e-waste, electronic waste, is trafficked around the world to be processed in incredibly dangerous ways. In fact, I also found out that a large percentage of the US e-waste is processed in prisons. The thing is that our disposability, the system of disposability, is very new. It's like a very consistent uptake. Every single minute of every single day, we use 1 million plastic disposable water bottles. Every minute, 1 million. And we encounter this system where it's like, it's fine, it goes in the recycling, or it goes in the trash, it disappears, it's not a problem. It is a massive problem. We've designed a system of regulations where it's too dangerous to have something that's not wrapped in plastic. Like literally, our laws reinforce disposability. But we need to change that. We need to move towards systems that are enabling our needs being met, but in closed-loop ways. And I talked about this idea of a product-service system where we meet our needs in a closed-loop way. You have one here called Vessel, which you should all be supporting. Boulder built Vessel. It's a fantastic solution. I love it. But here's my challenge to you. Tell me, what do these three things have in common? I'll tell you what they are. One is body products, the middle one is outdoor clothes, and the third one is tires. Someone tell me what they have in common. Plastic, yes, but the issue I want to get to is the outcome of that plastic. Say, whoever just said that, say it again, louder. And you sound like you're a younger human, so good on you for standing up all the older ones. Okay, no, it starts with M. Yes, microplastics. So all of these three products have microplastics. If you don't know what they are, they're basically small, tiny filaments of plastic that shed. So they used to put, thankfully there were a lot of laws that banned it, tiny microbeads in body products so you got that extra exfoliation. Not thinking about the fact that our drains in our showers lead straight to the ocean. Outdoor clothes are actually most engineered clothes, meaning we've put plastics in them so that they breathe better and they work better. Every time you wash them, small fibers disintegrate and end up in the natural environment. You can buy a washing machine thingamajiggy that stops that nowadays, so quick hack. And then the last one is car tires, which I found absolutely fascinating. It's estimated that the biggest contributor of microplastics in the oceans is car tires, which of course you're like, oh, because they go bald, and you have to replace them. And what other is on the side of the roads? Gutters. And where do gutters lead? In fact, everything leads to the oceans. And the oceans are our collective lungs. In fact, over 50% of our oxygen comes from phytoplankton and microorganisms in the ocean. And when I tell people these stories, I like to ask them, who likes fish? This is the first point of it affecting you. Again, the back just seems to lie. It's like they don't think I can see them. No fish eaters at the back, they're all vegetarians. Okay, so we love fish, humans love seafood. We have bioaccumulation, so of course, we see these whales washing up on the side of the beaches all over the world now filled with plastic. So of course, fish are eating the plastic. That's the first problem. The second problem, I think, hopefully we'll get one of my from you, which I've gotten like 3 so far. So it has to do with salt. So recent studies have shown that 90% of table salt studied from around the world has microplastics in it. And then another study that only had 8 people looked at their poop and found that everybody had microplastics in their poop. Because we live on an interconnected system and we are biological beings that require an interaction with nature, we are the direct, I was going to say descendants, but it's not the right word, or beneficiaries. Recipients, that'll go, thank you. This is a good audience participation. We could do this all together. Call a response. It impacts us. And people forget this because we go about our lives, we're busy drinking our frappe latte thingies, and we forget that we are part of these systems. But what is the most fascinating thing about these problems is that there are so many opportunities to intervene. We need to redesign the systems, but there are many problems that we face. Another one is our food cultures. Over 70% globally of our meat produced is produced in factory farms. In the US, it's up to 99%. I did hear in Boulder, whew, I said those words so fast. I did hear here in Boulder that you have a lot of grass-fed animals, which is great, but that's not the traditional way of producing meat products these days. And the reason this is a huge impact is not just the cruelty of entrapping animals in these places, it's got to do with something called nutrification. Who knows what that is? Yes. What is it? Oh, there's two of you. Sorry, I'm going to take the younger gentleman. Specific what type of pollutants? How would you describe that in a colloquial way?
Excessive nutrients.
You gotta say poop, come on. Very politically correct here. So basically, as he described, you have biological nutrients ending up in waterways, and what happens is those biological nutrients, it's too many words. You have poop ending up in waterways, and that is a feedstock for a particular type of microorganism that as its population grows, it sucks all the oxygen out of the ocean. So you have up to these 400, 500 different oceanic dead zones around the world, where there are huge swaths of the ocean where nothing can survive or live because of the fact that it is deoxygenated. Again, another word that I don't think exists. And so this is the thing. These impacts, they're not just as simple as the big impacts like climate change that we all know are affecting the way we produce food. The thing about climate change has been known for a long time. It's embedded in everything we do. It's very scary for a lot of people. I found this morning. Guardian has just decided that because someone wrote in and said, why don't you let us know how bad the climate change is? Every day they're reporting financial reports and climate change impacts now, which I think is really cool. Yeah. And good on the person who wrote in on that one. Just like one dude who was like, hey guys, I have an idea for you. So we're overwhelmed by scale when it comes to climate change. I personally, if I watch a Leonardo DiCaprio movie on this, I'm like in tears and having a panic attack, and I work in this space. So what happens is we induce a lot of fear when we talk about these issues, and fear is a really problematic thing to motivate people. It doesn't actually motivate people. Fear, as we are neurologically wired through the flight or fight response, freaks us out and often creates either ignoring, or a running away, or a complete freeze. In fact, for a lot of people, the fear of the future cognitively disables them. They shut down. And the reason this is a massive issue is because I'm going really fast because I've literally run out of time, but I have to get through this because otherwise I'll leave you hanging on the closer. So the thing is that the way we've evolved as a species is we have these cognitive glitches that we all share called cognitive biases. And they're essentially a mistaken reasoning. They're universal. There are hundreds of them. There are all these like weird social memes that we collect and we don't know we have. Some scientists say that actually only 12% of our decision making is done in our conscious brain and the rest is all our limbic system being all like fight, fright, or freeze. Maybe not that simple. And some of these biases affect us every day, like confirmation bias. Next time you're Googling, check to see if you're going to avoid the things that you don't already believe in. So when you look at information, it's very common for us to actually select the things that we think are going to benefit us. The same with choice paralysis. When you're trying to buy something and you're given too many options, you're overwhelmed, so you don't buy anything. This happens to me all the time. But one of the most important ones is status quo bias, because we are socialized in a system that reinforces itself, where it becomes normal to do things. And this bias towards maintaining the status quo is what causes a lot of our problems. And when it comes to climate change or any of these big fear-inducing concepts, we have these two competing biases that play out. One is negativity bias, where it's cognitively double the weight for a human to have a bad experience than a good. If you lose $100 on the street, it will sting for double the time than if you gained it. You know what I'm talking about. You find it and you're like, everyone's having beers on me. You lose it and for like 2 days you're like, damn, how was I so silly? Unless $100 is not that important to you, in which case that's a whole other thing. But this negativity bias means that when we're encountered with all of this negative information, the outcome is that we find it too painful, so we ignore it. And on the other side of that is optimism bias, which is essentially that humans also have a predisposition to believe that no matter how bad things get, you're going to be okay, meaning I'm going to be okay, right? Like, yeah, I mean climate change, but it's fine. I bought a farm. It's safe there. Literally, we tell ourselves these stories at night to keep ourselves from having an existential crisis. And the thing about our brains is that they're beautifully wired to make decisions for us, because our brains have to be efficient. They use a huge amount of our body's energy. So let me give you, you just come and take me off stage when I have to get off, okay? So basically, I have a quick trick for you. Okay. Really? I have to get off now? Oh, it's so late. How did that happen? Okay, quick trick. Quick trick? Okay. All right. So we have these things called schemas. They're mental representations. So everybody think, as I say these words, focus on what your brain does. Okay. It has a flat top and 4 legs. What is it? I said it the wrong way around. Let me do that again. I'm stressed by this man standing here. Let me do it again. I totally messed that up. It has 4 legs. Now it's going to not work because you all saw a table. I usually say it has 4 legs and a flat top, and when I say 4 legs, you think dog. Some people horse, which is really weird. And then what happens is I say flat top, and suddenly your brain goes, oh, no, that's a table. Let me do another quick one. It's round. It's orange. And it bounces. Yeah, you see what I did there, right? I tricked you again. Okay, so basically the thing is that our brains make up a lot of the interpretation of the world, and as social beings, we are totally influenced by social influence. We have a kind of predisposition to look to the people around us, and what that means is that a lot of these issues that we see, they're replicated, they're transferred, so we can intervene in them. I have to go so fast. Okay, so I'm so close. I can do it in like 45 to 90 seconds. Okay, so basically, there are all of these global challenges that we face, and I was recently challenged by the United Nations. This is a bit secret, actually. I know it's live stream, but we'll delete it off the internet later. But basically, I was challenged to figure out how to make sustainable lifestyles and living irresistible, because that's really the point of intervention that each of us have in our lives. In fact, every time I do a talk, the most common question is, Leyla, what's the one thing I can do to help, save the planet? And I was like, well, first of all, no one person can save the planet, but you can all change it. Let's just get that fact right. And the second thing is no one likes the answer, which is don't eat meat. Everyone hates that one. Whoa, except for you guys. This is like having my dad at prom at the side here. So I did this collaboration with the United Nations where I came up with this concept called the anatomy of action, and you all have it. It's your hand. In fact, you use your hands every single day to take a lot of actions, and those actions have impacts. Most people are not aware of those impacts, but just a simple one of your thumb, which is food, and your double fingers, which is stuff, if you can make simple interventions in your life choices, you can have far-reaching impacts. People believe that one person doesn't make a difference, but the economy is made up of individual actions. If anyone works for a company, you'll know they do market research and look at data of what people are clicking on and buying. That's you doing stuff in the economy. Therefore, the things you invest in are the things that you get. So one of the things we try to do is put these positive lifestyle swaps. So for example, with food, you can protein swap, which doesn't mean you have to all go vegetarian, but it does mean if you can make lifestyle choices about getting the nutrients you need, but in more sustainable ways, you can help change the economy. Because we are all citizen designers of the future, our actions have impacts. There are multiple ways that we can influence those that are around us, but by just doing it yourself and not sharing it and not disrupting the status quo of this normalized, hyper-disposable, exploitative economy, we will not create the change that we want to see in the world. And I'm going to end on that note because I'm almost out of breath. I guess we're not doing the Q&A.
Thank you so much. Don't go anywhere. Leyla's going to be out on the terrace to answer questions this afternoon, but stay tuned for a video that's going to start right now.